And joining us in the studio is Sil Lai Abrams, a founder of the advocacy group Truth and Reality and a survivor of domestic violence herself. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Has Ray Rice been held accountable for what he did?
It depends upon the context in which we think about accountability. From a social perspective, there has been a tremendous outrage and certainly a level of accountability that we continue to see play itself out in the news. We can see very clearly that the public has not forgiven Ray Rice, and there's still a lot of emotion around what transpired between he and his then fiancée. But from a legal perspective, I do not believe that he has been held accountable because of the fact that he was given access to a pretrial intervention program that is for victimless crimes, that is for nonviolent offenders, which was given to less than 1% of all of those that came to trial or were in the system in 2013 in New Jersey. So here we have an example of someone who, from a legal perspective, has he fulfilled his consequences? One could argue, theoretically, yes. But I could also say very clearly that the legal system needs to be reformed, that the way that batterers are treated by the system, when you contrast that to what happens to victims, it's out of whack.
All right, let's bring in Robert Boland. He is a sports attorney and former sports agent. Robert, thanks for joining us. You disagree here. You say that Rice has essentially done his time and deserves another shot at playing pro football?
Well, at least in terms of remorse and in terms of what his criminal disposition was, even as Ms. Abrams said, legally speaking, he's received his disposition. It's less severe in some cases than other people who are employed in the National Football League. And there's also one other issue here that needs to be discussed. In a collectively bargained for relationship like the National Football League, keeping a player out is a potential antitrust violation, which would bring up issues between the union and management when players who were convicted of criminal acts and misdemeanors and felonies are playing now, currently employed. So it's an interesting question of proportionality. I do agree, however, that Rice has certainly shed more attention on this matter than anyone ever has. And I think in large measure he has made all the right moves within terms of contrition and within terms of being circumspect about his act and what's happened. And I don't think it's about forgiveness. I think it's now about whether he has a right to earn a living again.
Well, what do you think about that? I mean, does he have the right to earn a living again in the way that Robert's saying here?
Absolutely, he has a right to earn a living. Now, does he have the right to, or does he have the privilege, in Ray Rice's own words, the privilege of playing in the NFL 9 months after the video became public and this huge outrage and this change within the NFL with the implementation of their policies and procedures panel? I would say no. For those of us who work in the domestic violence movement, who, as you stated, I'm a survivor of domestic violence. I've been down this path. And a lot of people that I know, we work within the movement and know that 9 months is not enough time to be able to guarantee that someone is, quote, rehabilitated. Contrition is kind of par of the course for someone who is a batterer. Of course, you're going to be sorry, particularly when there are certain social sanctions. But it is a privilege to play in the NFL. And he could get another job. This is just a question of whether or not what we're looking at here is how Ray Rice is a prism for our society, for all that is wrong within our system, not only within the NFL, but within society itself, in which a man could receive harsher sentence for, and I'm not minimizing what Michael Vick did, but for killing dogs than for beating or raping women. That is a fact.
What about the fact that his own fiancée gave him a second chance herself, actually married him after that elevator incident? What does that say?
Well, I mean, that speaks to, again, I would never speak out against Janae Rice. What she went through, I don't know. I'm not in the relationship. What I can say is that it takes a woman, a victim of domestic violence, on average 7 times to leave. In my personal case, I stayed with him. I had a child with him. You stay with your partner, and that what she's doing does not in fact mean that she is safe. It does not mean that he is reformed, and also she has a vested interest in ensuring and protecting her now husband, and that's what partners do, irrespective of whether or not they are currently battering.
All right, let's bring Robert back in here. So Robert, if an NFL team takes Rice on, right, and he gets his career back, are you concerned about the message that that sends to victims of domestic violence, let alone to those who are, let's say there are abusers out there who are watching this chain of events?
I'm less concerned about Ray Rice getting a job back than Greg Hardy getting a new contract immediately after what would be arguably a worse incident, and now being able to play after a 4-game suspension this year with the Dallas Cowboys, in part because he's simply a more in-demand player. I think that sends a worse message for the league than letting Rice, who spent almost the entire year and almost every minute after the act, which took place in March of 2014, really trying to do all the right things. I think one of the things that we miss, and I'm a former domestic violence prosecutor and worked as a trial judge's assistant in a domestic violence part in New York City, these are very, very complex matters that are very hard to adjudicate. But in the case of Ray Rice, he seems to have taken the steps, again, not to be forgiven, but at least to have an opportunity to show that there is a path back from this. And I think he's a good story in that way, or potentially a good story in that way. We never know until the past is really in the past about that, but he's the one person in professional football who's taken all the steps to ensure that he's not going to be a recidivist, and to see that this is a chance for a better ending, a better outcome to a very horrible act.
So you hear Robert talking about the path back. If not now, when would it be acceptable to allow Rice back on the field? Or do you say no, never?
Well, I want to first just address the comment that Robert just made about to ensure that he would not be a recidivist. It is too soon to tell whether or not he would be a recidivist. The rate of recidivism is extremely high. And domestic violence is not just physical violence, it's an entire litany of abuse that occurs within a relationship. Unfortunately, the physical violence is the only one that you can actually go to jail for. So I just want to make that point. But in terms of when, I would say that he would need more time to prove, in fact, that he has been, quote, reformed. In the case of Michael Vick, for example, he did time. He has also done work with PETA. He goes out and speaks to groups about what he did was wrong. There's really been an active stance taken on his part. And in Ray Rice's case, he still maintains and asserts that he is not a batterer, that it's an isolated incident. They don't have an issue with domestic violence. So we're seeing denial still at play here, as well as the expectation that because he says he's reformed, that we should take him at his word. So to your question, when should he come back? I would say give it a little more time. Give it at least a couple years, and then let's see where he really stands.
All right. Sil Lai Abrams, founder of the advocacy group Truth and Reality, and Robert Boland, sports attorney and former sports agent. Thank you both for joining me.